Welcome to Dashing Dish. I thought I had it all figured out. I had my daughter Maddie, and then she turned 4. Maddie's joining me in the kitchen today as we make her favorite hidden veggie creations. Our picky eater menu includes broccoli cheese bites, healthy pizza rolls, easy mac and cheese, and chocolate zucchini cake. I'm Katie Farrell, and we're discovering healthy and balanced meals that even my picky eater Maddie will eat. Today's show is all about Maddie, my daughter's favorites. And if you have a picky eater or just anyone at home that you think, they kind of eat like a 2-year-old, you'll love this show because it really is all about feeding picky eaters. That's my Maddie. So we're gonna start with her favorite breakfast, and this really does show just how picky she really is. I tried just about everything that you can think of for breakfast options, and you know, I've pretty much failed on all of them. She didn't like smoothies, she didn't like bagels, waffles, pancakes, you name it. So I finally found something that she loved for breakfast, and we call it her peanut butter bars. So this is a peanut butter bar that has some protein in it. We're gonna start with 1 2/3 cup of oat flour. So that's a really good way to start the day. Even though these look like they're candy bars, they're made with oat flour, old-fashioned oats that are ground up into a flour. So we know that it's whole grain and good for you. 1/3 cup of protein powder, 1/4 cup of sweetener, just a pinch of salt, so I do about a 1/4 teaspoon. And then for our wet ingredients, we have a 1/2 cup of honey. These are really simple to make. Oftentimes, I'll double batch them and freeze half of it so that I have some ready to go for later. And 1 cup of peanut butter. And you could use almond butter or any kind of nut butter. And actually, almond butter is a really great source of nutrition. Almonds are full of calcium and all different kinds of minerals, so it's actually really great to use almond butter for this as well. Now I'm just gonna stir until this is combined, and a lot of times when I'm making bars or no-bake balls, I'll start by stirring it, and then once I combine it enough, I'll get my hands into it and really mix it. Okay, so that's looking good. Now I'm gonna get my hands in there and bring it all together. You just want it to look like a cookie dough, and that's how you know that it's ready. So a lot of times I'll put some chocolate chips in these. I'll make it also into balls, and we call them cookie balls. So that's another great way to get your kids to get their protein and their whole grains and some healthy fat in. And you know, when it comes to feeding Maddie, it's been quite a journey for me. It really all started when she was 6 months old. The very first thing I gave her was some banana. And I thought that every single 6-month-old loves banana because it's sweet and it's the first thing that they get to taste outside of milk. So you would think that they would just take it and love it. But no, she spit it all out and she made a shuddering face. And I knew that I would have quite the case on my hands after a few things I tried, and she spit every single thing out. So, lo and behold, she turns 1 year old, and that's when you really start to think about feeding them solids. So I started to just feed her, you know, anything that I could think of. So eventually she ended up liking applesauce. So from there, I mixed almost everything with applesauce, and she would eat it little by little, and her palate grew and grew. And to my surprise, when she was about 1.5, she was eating everything. Broccoli, cauliflower, you name it, she was eating it. And so I was so proud, and I thought, oh my gosh, I turned my picky eater into a great eater. And you know, then when she turned 2, things kind of started to regress from there. She said, no, Mommy, I don't like this broccoli. I don't like this cauliflower. And everything that on her plate she didn't like, she would just tell me one by one. And then I made the mistake of saying, okay, well, you don't have to eat it. So eventually, she just stopped eating all her green stuff and anything that had any color to it that kind of freaked her out. So I started to just kind of go with what she liked, and little by little I would cut things out, And you know, that was kind of where I made a mistake, but I didn't know any better. This was my first child trying to feed, and you know, I learned a lot of lessons along the way. I also learned that it can be really important to start at the very beginning. You know, I really kind of hand fed Maddie everything with a spoon, which I think is pretty common. And from watching some of my friends and my sisters who really allowed their kids to kind of independently explore food and try things on their own, I realized that that's a really good place to start when it comes to preventing picky eating. And just kind of, you know, encouraging them to keep going with certain foods instead of stopping them. So now that she's 4, I'm really having to kind of backtrack and say, okay, we're gonna try new things. And although it's not easy, you know, I'm really diligent now in trying to just encourage her to try new things. So what I do is I'll put 1 or 2 things on a plate that she recognizes. And then I'll put 1 or 2 things that she isn't as familiar with. And so then I just say, try 1 or 2 bites of the new food before you eat your other foods. And so we've gotten into this practice where she knows she has to try 1 or 2 bites before she says that she doesn't like it. And so that's a really good way of encouraging them to say, you know, before you say, I don't like this, you have to try it. And so far it's done really good. There have been a few things that she says, no, I don't like it. And then we just move on from there. And then there's been a few things that she really likes. So that's been exciting. So as you can see, I just rolled out the dough and I made it into bars. And you could make these as thin or as thick as you'd like. And then usually I just cut them down into a little bit smaller bars. And like I said, you could put chocolate chips in these. You can even roll it into balls. So they make a really great cookie ball. And that's something else that she likes to eat for breakfast. So these are one of Maddie's favorites. And if you have a picky eater at home, these make a great breakfast snack or even a part of their meal. Well, today's show is all about Maddie, so we're gonna move on to her favorite lunch. And this is a meal that anyone can make, possibly even toddlers make with their parents. This is my own homemade version of Easy Mac. So we're gonna start with 2 cups of water that we're gonna add to a pot. 4 cups of milk of choice, and I use almond milk. And then 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And what makes this recipe Easy Mac is we're actually going to bring this to a boil and then we're gonna add our dry pasta. So there's no colander, there's no straining or draining. You just add the pasta right to the milk and water in a pot. It will come to a boil. We'll boil the pasta and we add our cheese sauce ingredients. So easy. Okay, so now our milk and water have come to a boil, so we're gonna add our pasta. I have 16 ounces of dry pasta that I'm adding to this boiling milk. And I'm just gonna give it a quick stir. You can use any kind of pasta that you like. I like brown rice pasta or lentil-based pasta because I find that it cooks up really nicely and it also provides some extra nutrition. So we're gonna let the pasta cook for 7 to 8 minutes, just until it's tender. You don't wanna overboil it or overcook it because it will become mushy as you add the cheese sauce ingredients. So just until tender. Okay, so it's been about 8 minutes, so our pasta is nice and tender, as you can see. So I'm gonna now turn off the heat. And then I'm gonna add our cheese sauce ingredients. So I have here a 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, 4 ounces of cream cheese, and 2 cups of shredded cheese of choice. So I have shredded cheddar, but if you like a white cheese sauce, then you can use a white cheese. And then we're just gonna stir until the cheese is melted and the sauce thickens up. And you can see how good that looks. Now, if you had a little bit more of an adventurous eater, you could add some grilled chicken to this, or some broccoli. you know, you can add whatever you'd like to your mac and cheese. But this is gonna be perfect for Maddie. And what I would do is I would typically serve this up as a lunch or a dinner with some fruit and maybe a few other little sides. But the biggest thing that I try and focus on with Maddie is just balance. And so I'll think about her plate. Does she have some carbohydrates, some proteins, and some healthy fats? And as long as I'm achieving balance somehow and I'm getting those food groups in, then I know that I'm doing a really good job. And more than anything, you know, if you're feeding your kids the best that you can, guaranteed you're doing a great job. So hopefully this recipe helps win over your picky eater if you have one. Coming up next, my daughter Maddie joins me in the kitchen as we make one of her favorites, broccoli cheese muffins. The most difficult thing to get our picky eaters to eat is vegetables. Maddie, do you like vegetables? No, she already has her mind made up that she doesn't like it. But this is a great recipe because it includes lots of cheese and the broccoli gets nice and crispy, crunchy, so it really rules out a lot of the texture issues with vegetables. And we're gonna make some broccoli cheese bites. Does that sound good? You like cheese, don't you? I know you'll add this cheese to the bowl for me. Can you add that? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I have a package of frozen broccoli. I just did a 16-ounce package of broccoli and I steamed it in the microwave. Super simple. Already chopped, washed, ready to go for you. 2 cups of cheese. You wanna add the salt? A 1/4 teaspoon of salt. 1/2 cup of almond flour. And the almond flour is kind of like a breading in a recipe that kind of binds it, but it also gives a great punch of nutrition. And then 1 egg. And then we're just gonna stir this all together. Mommy's gonna give it a quick stir, and then guess what I'll let you do? Scoop it into the muffin tin. Now, one of the things I found when it came to feeding Maddie early on, with kind of overcoming some of the picky eating, was to use a muffin tin. I started making anything and everything I could think of in a muffin tin. And really, if you give kids a really small bite-sized portion of something, I find that it comes off way less intimidating. It's more their size and it's perfectly portioned and fun to eat. So anything that you can think of that you would make in a big pan, if you can put it in a muffin tin or even a donut pan, that's always a really great place to start. Okay, we're gonna stir this just so that the egg and the almond flour kind of gets mixed in. And that looks great. Then Maddie, I'm gonna have you take this scooper and I'm gonna have you scoop it into the muffin tin. You gonna help me? You know how to do this at home, right? Good job. All right, we're gonna get some more on there. I'll let you squeeze it in. Good job. Okay, so we're gonna fill up all of our muffin tins just until they're about full, and we're gonna bake this 425 degrees for about 25 to 30 minutes. Well, when I was a kid, I loved pizza rolls, and my Maddie is following suit. So these pizza rolls are so easy to make. You can make them right at home without the box frozen version. Let me show you how I made them. To start, preheat the oven to 375 degrees and line a baking sheet pan with parchment paper. Then, cut each piece of string cheese into 3 even parts, which will become the cheese filling for the pizza rolls. Next, fill a small bowl with 1/4 cup water, which will act as the glue to seal the egg roll wrapper shut. Place 1 teaspoon of sauce in the center of each wrapper, followed by 2 pepperoni slices and 1 piece of string cheese. Brush the edges of the egg roll wrappers with water using your finger and roll each wrapper over the pepperoni and cheese. When the wrapper is rolled around the filling, press down the sides of the wrapper to seal. Place each roll on a baking pan and spray each pizza roll with cooking spray to give them a golden tan. I popped them in the oven for 15 minutes Then turn the oven up to broil for the last 30 to 60 seconds or until the tops become lightly golden brown. Serve these pizza rolls with marinara sauce for dipping and enjoy. After feeding a picky husband for 13 years and now my daughter for almost 5, I have a few things I've learned along the way. Here are the top 3 tips that I've found to be helpful in feeding picky eaters. Number 1, be consistent. Being consistent with meal and snack times will make sure that your children's bellies are hungry for real food when it comes time to eat. 2, make mealtime more fun and relaxed. Pressure to do something is never a good catalyst for change, especially when it comes to children. Creating an environment that opens their minds to try new things is much better than force-feeding every time. 3, always keep something they enjoy on their plate. When kids sit down and take an overview of their plate, oftentimes they look to see if there's something they can recognize and enjoy. This makes the meal seem more approachable to start. I like to add 1 or 2 new things at a time and encourage Maddie to take at least 1 bite before she says she doesn't like something, which is always much easier than approaching a whole new meal.
You know, ever since I became a mom 5 years ago when I had Maddie, I learned what it meant to have your heart walking around outside of your body. And I'm sure all of the moms out there, no matter how young or old your children are, can understand exactly what I mean when I say if they're having a good day and they're going through a good season of life, it brings your heart such peace and such rest. But if they're going through a struggle, it really does weigh on your heart as well. And I'll never forget, I learned this so very clearly when Maddie went to her first day of preschool. Up until that time, she was at home with me, and I was pretty much a stay-at-home, work-from-home mom, and we spent most of our days together, crafting and baking and playing. But that day when I dropped her off at preschool, everything left my control. I didn't know how she was doing. All I knew is that when I dropped her off, I saw the tears start to well up in her eyes. I saw anxiety just crush her little heart, and that just absolutely weighed on mine. I remember driving home and thinking, did I make a mistake? Should I have sent her next year instead of this year? And a few days went by and the drop-offs weren't really getting easier. The teacher told me that Maddie was clinging to her leg most of the class. This was really starting to burden my heart. I felt like I couldn't really do much of anything in my day when she was at school. All I did was sit on the couch and worry about her. And so I realized I had to take it to the heart of God. And this is when I realized that being a mom can ultimately draw us closer to the heart of God if we let it. So instead of worrying, being anxious, trying to control everything in my ability, I laid it at the feet of Jesus. I just said, God, I trust Maddie's heart and my heart to your heart. And it was in that moment that I felt this huge weight lift off of me. And sure, things didn't go perfectly the very next day, but I did see God's faithfulness as I continued to pray, and I also started to see my heart change because it drew me closer to God as I trusted Him with Maddie's heart. So I hope this encourages you moms today. If there's something that's weighing on your heart, maybe you are seeing your children go through a really hard time, or maybe you're worried about what's going on when they're not at home. Whatever it might be, you can bring it to the heart of Jesus. Take their heart, take what's weighing on your heart, and bring it to His heart, and it'll draw you closer to Him.
Coming up next, you can even hide veggies in your favorite chocolate cake. Stay tuned for all the details in this decadent dessert. All right, well, I have Miss Maddie here with me for Maddie's Favorites. Maddie, this show is all about you and your favorite foods. And I know this is one of your favorite foods. Can you add some chocolate to the bowl? We're gonna be making one of Maddie's favorites, and I typically make this in a donut pan because what kid doesn't love donuts? So I just make the batter, put it in a donut pan instead of the 8x8 pan. But I have here 2 zucchini that are grated or shredded, and I'm gonna add some chocolate chips 1/2 cup of sweetener, 1 cup of oat flour, 1/2 cup of cocoa powder, and 1/2 cup of applesauce to the bowl. Maddie, do you want to help me kind of scoop that in, the applesauce? So this is a chocolate zucchini cake, but in our house we just call it chocolate donuts. And of course we add sprinkles and sometimes some frosting to the donuts to make them really fun. And if you are a mom of a picky eater, you probably find that your greatest struggle is anything that's green. And what I love about this recipe is the chocolate completely covers the zucchini, so you can't see anything green, and your kids will never know that there's zucchini in it. Then 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. Okay, Maddie, you want to stir this up? Okay, give it a good stir. Good job. And as you can see, the cocoa powder makes it nice and chocolatey and also covers up that green zucchini. We've also used yellow squash in this, so it doesn't matter what type of squash you use, any kind of grated squash will work. And sometimes I even put the zucchini straight into a blender, and that makes it really easy. I just chop it into bite-sized pieces, throw it in a blender, and puree it. And the great benefit of that is then it really leaves no guessing for texture or color of green. Maddie, you like to make this into donuts, don't you? And when we make it into donuts, do you like to put sprinkles on it or frosting?
Frosting and sprinkles.
Ooh, both. That is so yummy. So this looks pretty good. What do you think? Yeah, and it tastes just like chocolate cake, doesn't it? Yep, chocolate cake and chocolate donuts. We like both of those. So now we're gonna pour it into our pan. Okay, you did a great job. Maddie, what's your favorite food? Do you have a favorite?
Pizza.
Pizza. And what's your favorite dessert?
Chocolate.
That's right. We call her Papa's girl because my dad is a lover of all things chocolate. And so Maddie is taking after Papa, and she is loving all things chocolate. So we call you Papa's girl, don't we? Okay, Maddie, that looks so good. And I know you would like to have some extra chocolate chips on top, wouldn't you? And look what we have here, some chocolate chips. You want to sprinkle some on? Okay, that looks great. And I think those will be delicious. What do you think? We're gonna pop these in the oven, 350 degrees for about 30 minutes until a toothpick comes out clean. Thanks for your help, sweetie. Good job. Well, Maddie and I are finishing up Maddie's favorites today with a tea party, of course. And Maddie, doesn't our food look delicious that you made? Well, it's so much fun baking and cooking with my little girl. And one of the best things that you could do, I found, is get kids in the kitchen with you. Be an example. You know, try new things yourself and encourage them to try new things. And it's okay if they say no, just give it time and keep trying. Just don't give up. All of these recipes are Maddie's favorites, and we've got some veggies snuck in there and all kinds of nutrition. For all of these recipes and more tips for mom life and all things picky eating, head over to dashanddish.com.